We're through 10 days of Husky camp, and the season's coming up fast. What are some of the talking points of Husky training camp? Stick with us right here, and we'll talk all about it on Locked On Huskies.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to week 2 of Locked On Huskies. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. We write for Inside the Huskies with Fan Nation and Sports Illustrated, and we are coming off of day 10 of fall camp. Lars, it has been a whirlwind. I can't believe it's been 2 weeks already. You just said it to me in the pre-show, like, yeah, it's this. I believe this is day 10, and it just hit me that the season is just a few weeks away, and this has just been such a whirlwind for us so far. And I know I keep saying I can't believe it, but really, it's going to be an exciting year, and I'm just excited to get going. And I also just want to take a quick second to talk about our title sponsor today, LinkedIn. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Now, Lars, the biggest story that we've seen so far has been Michael Penix. Heisman frontrunner, probably is second in some sports books behind Caleb Williams as one of the favorites to win the Heisman this year. And he wasn't out there for almost a week. Well, he was out there, but he didn't take team reps for nearly a week. He was today on Sunday. You're listening to this on Monday morning, and he looked good. He had some zip behind the ball, making all the throws he needed to do. Let's get into it. What have you seen from him so far in camp, and do you think that Husky fans need to be concerned?
No, I mean, I think it's almost the luxury that you have with Michael Penix, that he has such a firm grasp of the offense to where you can get Dylan Morris and even Austin Mack, Alex Johnson, other backup quarterbacks more reps. Because if for some unfortunate reason Michael Penix has to go out for a series or two, there can't be any drop off. This is the season where Washington's going to chase the national championship. There can be no drop off at quarterback. Historically, we know there's a huge kind of, not a huge gulf, but at least a decent gulf between Penix and Dylan Morris. Over the past year, I think Morris has closed that gap, but there is still enough of a gap. So anytime the backups can get reps, I think that's actually a good thing, because we know that Penix isn't actually hurt. It's just managing him. And he's not the only player they're doing this with. He's just the biggest name and the most obvious name to focus on. But I think it's actually more important for fans to understand this is good for Washington, not bad, because Penix already has a relationship with Rome Odunze, Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk, Giles Jackson, everybody on the first team offense. He doesn't need all of these reps, because you put him in for a series and somebody rolls over on his ankle. You don't need that. You don't need that for anybody, but especially for Michael Penix. So I think giving him those days off and giving him those series off and things like that, that's just a smart way to manage it, because if you're getting into the season and he's already burnt out and he's kind of got the Jake Browning arm from 2017, 2018, where he just didn't have the same zip on his ball, that's not advantageous. So I think the coaching staff has done everything right from handling Michael Penix this fall.
No, you're absolutely right. And Ryan Grubb said it best when he talked to us the other day. And he said, if he's even at 99%, we don't want to push him. Obviously, they're very concerned with not concerned. They're very aware of his long injury history. You know, he had a couple of ACL tears at Indiana and also had a shoulder issue while he was there. And last year was the first time he got through a season completely healthy. So if there even is a 99% chance that he's 99% healthy, why take the risk? And I think that's the right thing to do on their part. And I want to talk a little bit about him as a quarterback, because is it fair to say that he is playing at a higher level right now when he is out there and throwing without the sore arm, that he's playing better than he was at any point last season?
I think he's playing up to the level with his arm. I think his mobility and his agility, like his escape ability, we saw it a little bit against Oregon on the third down of the first series where he was able to spin out of two defenders. He's gotten better at that. And I think that's something to where the offensive line, if whether or not it can hold up from last season, I think that's where Michael Penix's value is going to be, is can you buy enough time in the pocket? Can you move around? Can you get the yards on the ground to where that's going to be a little more the case this season. I think last season the offensive line was so good in front of him. And again, not to say that this offensive line isn't, but I just think, and to your point, Ryan Grubb told me after the Alamo Bowl, that was the best offensive line he's ever coached and he's ever played with. That's a big statement for Ryan Grubb. So I think this year, Michael Penix's ability to scramble and kind of evade guys is going to be a little bit more crucial. I think that's what I've seen most in his improvements in fall camp.
I like that point a lot. And just to touch on it for a second, the interior of the offensive line, I think it's really promising. And not to knock on the last group at all, because it was obviously very solid. You can talk about Jackson Kirkland and Henry Bainivalu and Corey Luciano as much as you want. But when you look at the prowess of just the talent of the guys that are right now the first team, which is Julius Buelo at left guard, Mateo Mele at center, and Nick Kalepo at right guard, all of those guys were 4-star recruits coming out of high school. And it's just leveling up. And I obviously they're, sometimes offensive line recruits can fall under the radar given certain circumstances, but there's a reason that all three of these guys were rated as high as they were. So there's something to be said for this offensive line has a chance to be just as good, if not better, if their communication is solid. And, we've seen that Buelo in particular struggle in the past, but he's leaner. He looks more athletic. His feet look faster. And that can go a long way towards protecting Michael Penix on what could be, as you said, a historic season for this team.
And to your point, also, the guy that is being replaced instead of Corey Luciano is being replaced by a sixth-year senior, Mateo Mele, who's already got a pretty good chemistry with Penix. I talked to him in the spring about it, and he said, no, we're pretty much in sync, the same as Corey and Mike were last season. So I think that's good. That relationship and that dynamic is going to control the success of the offensive line. Because I agree that Nate Kalepo and whoever honestly plays at any of those three positions, I think UW has the depth to where if they need to rotate guys or kind of mix and match the line, they've got all the bodies to do it. But I think that center relationship is going to be a big determining factor. So I think the fact that also Mele getting reps with everybody else is good because, again, to your point, we keep going back to it, Penix hasn't played a full season outside of last season. If you want to bank on that again for this season, great. But it's pretty risky to bet on it. Again, just being honest. It's not that we want Penix to get hurt, but he's only done it for 1 year. So you want to see it for a second season, and I think the offensive line and Mateo Mele in particular, he's got so much experience playing a number of positions on the offensive line that I think, to your point, this offensive line is actually going to be pretty well. We just haven't seen it. I think that's the thing. Seeing it against UW's players is different than when you're going to play against Oregon, USC, things like that.
No, that's a really good point because, yeah, there's going to be some strong pass rushes that they're going to go up against. But especially I think that the size of this offensive line, especially on the interior, is just insanely impressive. You look at Nate Kalepo, 6'6", 325, I think he is now. Julius Buelo, 6'7", 320. I know Mateo Mele is a little bit smaller. I think he's 6'5", 300, 305, something like that at this point.
Yeah.
I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but those numbers are all just things to consider, and they're going to go a long way towards keeping Michael Penix healthy. And managing the load for him is really not necessarily a bad thing at this point. I think the coaching staff, as you said, is really doing a good job of getting other guys reps because it's something that Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb have both talked about is that they don't have a number 3 quarterback at this point. And they can roll with Alex Johnson, a junior college walk-on if they want to, but especially we talked about in the last episode, what we've seen from Austin Mack and how impressive he's been. It's something that was really promising, especially coming from a dude who's 17 years old. And getting him those reps, Ryan Grubb specifically said, this is insanely important. We love what we're seeing. We love the progression that he's making, and he's really doing a solid job. And you know what else is just really a solid job? Finding a job on LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. I mean, LinkedIn, it's a super helpful place in general. I've made so many quality connections on there, and it's helped me find some freelance work in the past as a writer. So it's just really an awesome place. It's super easy to create a free job post on LinkedIn Jobs. All you have to do is add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. You know, I wish we were able to do that with you and hire you through LinkedIn Jobs, but, you know, we have some other connections that made that happen. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockdowncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockdowncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. You know, we got a review that said that my ad transitions were atrocious. And I just, thank you. I appreciate it. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback. You know, I had somebody the other day talk about one of the other ads, which I won't mention because they're not on this episode, but saying that, hey, no, I really enjoy it. And I think you're doing a great job with this. So I appreciate that. But what I really want to talk about here is I want to talk about some camp standouts. We've both chosen one guy on offense and one guy on defense. We'll run through it pretty quick since obviously this is a shorter podcast. But the one person that I feel that we need to start with, we'll go offense first and then we'll go defense because I just really want to talk about Denzel Boston. I made a statement on one of our articles on Inside the Huskies that Denzel Boston has been far and away the most impressive player that we've seen at camp. Because, yeah, you know, Penix, Rome, Braylon Trice, all these guys are, you know, making their mark, standing out. But nobody has been more consistent and more consistently impressive than Denzel Boston. Former 3-star recruit at Emerald Bridge. Just every single day, he has made some kind of play that just makes you turn your head and just so, wow. Like, just, it's insanely impressive watching him. He had, a 71-yard touchdown the other day. A couple of juggling catches against tight coverage. I know Thaddeus Dixon's been on him a lot. And especially he's still running with the second team alongside Jeremy Bernard. And I feel like that just really speaks to the depth of this wide receiver room. And he's just been so much fun to watch this spring. Excuse me, this fall.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And to piggyback off that, because the other guy that I have is Rasheed Williams. Because to your point, one thing that I talked with Jamarcus Shepard, receivers coach, about is how deep this room is. Not just 1, 2, 3, not just 4, 5, 6, but there's so many guys coming down the line. Denzel and Rasheed Williams, a freshman this year, one of the 3 freshmen coming in. I really think that this offense is suited for the long haul. And Shepard told me, actually, this is kind of a spoiler for this coming week, this is the deepest room he's ever had, ever.
Yes.
And I agree with him on that. But to his point, he also said that Denzel Boston didn't have a lot of knowledge about the game coming in, and he has surpassed that in a year and a half now. So I think once these guys get their guys in, and I think Rasheed Williams is going to be a guy next year where you're going to start to see the same development that we're seeing now from Denzel, much like Parker Brailsford, another offensive lineman that I think is he's probably not going to play a ton this year. He might get some chance on special teams, but I think he's going to be the second string center, but they need him to get a little bit bigger. And so I think all these guys that
he's powerful though for his size.
Nick Harris comment is real. And fun fact, Nick Harris called him after he committed to Washington.
Love
and
that.
they had a nice bonding moment and got to know each other on a personal level. And so when everyone brings up, oh, hey, that's Nick Harris's kind of like a clone, it's like, but Parker's actually, I think, stronger than Nick was.
I agree.
I truly, and again, he wants to get up to about 285. He's at 270 right now, 270, 275. So I don't think he's going to get all that weight on that he wants this fall. And to your point, I think we're going to see all the fruits of these guys stepping up in camp next year. Now that doesn't mean they're not going to play this year and they're not going to be a factor.
Sure.
But I just think that's what you want to have as a championship level program, is your guys having a hard time getting on the field, but having a plethora of talent.
No, that's absolutely right. And that was something that I was thinking about that the other day because, actually it's in the article that I wrote today, Sunday, go find it on Inside the Huskies, it's not just because today there was a lot of underclassmen on the field for a lot of the time. And it's not just about making sure that this team is set and it's a one and done run in 2023. It's about making sure this team is set up for the long haul as they move towards the Big Ten. Because if they can be consistently competitive in the Big Ten, this program has the chance to be one of the top 10, top 15 programs in the nation on a year in and year out basis.
And to that point, we both know the level of competition in the Big Ten, the level of competition that they've faced the past 3 or 4 years in the Pac-12. It is night and day different. It is not even close. And
levels.
Same thing to the SEC. It's kind of like there's a 3-tier gap, but the Big Ten and the SEC are kind of, there's maybe like a couple of centimeters in margin. The Pac-12 golf was a big one. So I think having all these big 4-star guys, not just getting the 4 stars, right? Because we've learned, me and you especially have learned, you guys can come in and not really factor at all, and they go away. And it's like, well, you just lost a former 4-star. It's like, yeah, but he didn't do anything.
Right.
So it's not really a loss. And I think that, again, that's what makes this staff so special is they know where to go get the guys. I've actually asked Scott Huff and a couple other coaches, what are your thoughts on moving to the Big Ten? How is that going to expand your recruiting footprint? They're not even really thinking about that. Well, one, because it's currently in the season, but two, because they already know they're going to go get the guys wherever they may be. And they've proven that over the years. They have a few general areas. But I think the move to the Big Ten and leveling up in that competition, getting ahead of that level up before you join the Big Ten is the key. And I think that's what's going to set them up for success down the road.
No, you're absolutely right. I like that a lot. And not to not touch on your point, I just want to move over to the defensive side.
Yep.
I want to talk about Lance Holtzclaw. Lance Holtzclaw was one of my favorite players coming out of a admittedly small 2022 recruiting class. But he just was one of those guys that you take on the edge who's just oozing with potential. And we're starting to see why schools are able to take and develop guys like that. And what happens when you do a good job with that. Lance is up to 225, 230 pounds after coming in around 210. And he explodes off the edge, man. He's so fast. His first step is really, really just out of this world. And then you combine that with the hand fighting that he's developed with the director of sports science, Ben Creamer, who's done an awesome job with the edge rushers and defensive linemen, just helping them work on hand placement, hand fighting, and just counter moves, everything, you name it. And Lance, he talked to me the other day about it and just said that, yeah, it's just so awesome being able to just kind of know what to do with your hands and being able to fight and do all those sort of things that you're supposed to, because that's something where a lot of kids don't have that experience in high school. They don't get a chance to learn that. And this is not a shot at the previous coaching staff, but I don't really see a lot of other coaches out there, like really anywhere you look, with like karate bags on their hands, just going through hand fighting before games. And that's something that you see Maurice Himes, Braylon Trice, these guys doing, and it's paying off. This team was third in the conference in sacks last year, and they have a chance to be better than that this year.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I remember standing back in the end zone with you, watching Braylon and I think Maurice Himes is the other one that you mentioned, doing those drills before pregame. I think it was, I don't know what game exactly it was. It was probably midway through the season. But you just kind of see that, and then a month later, Maurice Himes is getting his first career sack against Washington State. So it's like you're seeing all this stuff pay off because, again, when you go watch practice and we go do all these things, it's like, okay, how does that matter on Saturdays? Right. And everything this staff does, we're not trying to overhype them, but it's just true. The proof is in the pudding. They took the same team that went 4-8 and went 10-2 and 11-2 after a bowl game against Texas. So these guys have proven that they can do it. And I think, to your point, going on defense, the one guy that has been here the longest, that is really the veteran of the defensive back group, but hasn't, again, almost like his own version of Penix, hasn't been able to play a full season, Elijah Jackson. He's gotten up to, I think, almost a 41-inch vertical earlier this year. He's added a lot of weight, muscle that they wanted, Juice Brown wanted him to do. And I think we've seen that in fall camp. He's been able to stay healthy throughout the entire first week and a half of fall camp. And historically, there's always kind of been some time in the first week where something would happen to Elijah. And that hasn't happened this year. And again, we don't want injuries. We don't hope for him. But I think the fact that he's stronger now, it's kind of like this is the full Elijah Jackson package. And going back to what this team needs to do to have success, the corners have to be locked down. No pun intended. But really, where did they struggle last year in the meat of the season? Javion Green, Julius Irvin, all these guys that kind of had to get thrust into the position. Elijah Jackson knows the defense. He knows it. And he's got Jabbar Muhammad on the other side to lock that down and Mish right next to him. So I think the combination of how the staff has rearranged the secondary and Elijah being healthy, I think Elijah being healthy could be one of the unsung things, positives of the defense this season, because the one thing that they didn't do last season was force interceptions. Elijah can jump. Yes. He's a physical guy. If he can stay healthy for an entire year, I have no doubt the passing defense will improve. I have no doubt about that. That's one of the things that's going to have to improve if Washington wants to take that 11-win mark and actually flip it to 11-1 heading into a bowl game.
No, that's a great point. And, we're jumping ahead of ourselves a little bit because, make sure you tune in tomorrow when we're going to start our preview series. We're going to just go position by position, break down quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, offensive line, and then get into defense as well. And just make sure you tune in for that because I think we got a little bit ahead of ourselves there, but all for good reason, right?
It's a tease.
Yeah, exactly. Now, let's talk about Zach Durfee. So I'll give us the quick rundown here, the quick 30-second version, and then we can just get into just kind of the meat of, whatever the NCAA thinks is going on, because whatever. But Zach Durfee, really, really impressive edge rusher who transferred from the University of Sioux Falls to the University of Washington in December of last year, 2022, and just looks like an insanely impressive player. He just has a crazy burst, really athletic, super strong off the ball, and looks like he could make an impact for the Huskies this year after just his first year playing on the defensive line while he was at Sioux Falls. But enter the NCAA, because technically this is Durfee's second transfer. What a lot of people did not know when Zach originally arrived at Washington is that in the fall of 2020, he spent that semester as a student at North Dakota State, not playing football, just as a student. And now the NCAA is saying, we don't know if you're eligible to play. We think this might be a sketchy transfer. Lars, thoughts?
I mean, of all the sketchy transfers that the NCAA has heard waivers on in the past, I'm just going to be generous and say decade or even half decade.
Oh, sure.
This isn't one. This isn't one of them. I understand if you are on scholarship at another school and then you transfer multiple times. That I can at least understand, because we're seeing that at UNC with their wide receiver and a few other players. But there's no consistency, and this situation does not apply. He wasn't an athlete. He was just a student, just a guy going to college. It would be no different than if somebody went to Seattle Central Community College before transferring to Washington. Did they play at Seattle Central? No, because they don't have a football program there. And even if they did, you're not on scholarship. So right. that should not count as a first transfer. This one, fair. North Dakota or Sioux Falls to UW, cool. You're able to play right away.
Sure.
I have a hunch the NCAA is going to be their usual self about this. But when you take a step back and look at the case that UW makes, there's really no reason why he shouldn't play this year. But the NCAA will probably find a way, unfortunately. I think part of me also wonders, will there be a happy medium resolution? Can he be suspended for not suspended, but, ineligible for the first, what do you want to say, 3 games?
2 to 3 games. Yeah, why not?
Jackson Kirkland had to sit out a couple of games last year. Anyway,
he had to sit out one and then miss the next 2 due to injury.
Exactly. So I think there's probably a way that the NCAA could find a way around it. But I mean, as we're seeing with a few other things that the NCAA is dealing with right now, there is no consistency. So we really don't know what their answer is going to be. I know UW doesn't know what the answer is going to be. And yet this really is a cut and dry answer that she should be good to go.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And, if we look at it, I feel like the best thing to do right now is call the situation 50-50. Yep. Because the NCAA is just always a giant question mark. And then you look at just what the situation it is, and it's like, why? Just seriously, why? I don't understand.
Well, and to me, it's also, and again, this gets kind of a little into the weeds of what we do, but when you're going from Sioux Falls and FCS, right? I believe they're
FCS now. They were NAIA. They're FCS now.
They've graduated since Kalen was in charge of the program.
Yes.
But that's still a significant, you're still going up a level. So I don't think that should be a separate kind of deal to where, okay, if you're transferring from FBS to FBS to FBS to FBS, yeah, you got to sit at some point unless your name is Brew McCoy.
I was going to say Keaton Slovis as well, but yeah, I like that example.
But that's the thing is there's so many examples of the NCAA letting multiple players transfer multiple times without having to sit out. Brew McCoy never missed a season because of ineligibility from the NCAA.
Correct.
Let's be clear about that. He sat out the 21 season for various reasons, but then was deemed immediately eligible at Tennessee. In my opinion, after you transfer from Texas, USC, Tennessee, it's like you're transferring 2, 3, 4 times, and that's okay. But a kid who didn't play football at his first school and played 1 year at his second school should not be penalized at his new school.
No, you're 100% right. And I kind of want to also talk about, because obviously, like I said, we're going to talk about each position group individually, but I also just want to talk about how that impacts the edge room.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, because we're in a perfect ideal world. First of all, we know Braylon. We know who the starters are. We know who the starters are, but
no question.
everything about UW is going to be who is number 2 and who is number 3. Who are your second line change and who are your third line change? Because that's where the drop off came last year. Is when you brought reserves.
If you had to say right now, and I know our editor Dan Rayleigh put up a great piece on it on Inside the Huskies. If you had to say right now who the second team and third team edge rushers are, who would you say they are?
Excluding all the conversation we just had, it should be Zach Durfee. And see, that second one is interesting because it could be Maurice, it could be Lance, it could be Sakai, there's so many guys.
I think I know where I'd go with this. Because for me, I would say definitely Durfee on the second team, but next to him right now would probably be Voice Nufi.
Because I knew I was forgetting a name.
I was going to say, come on, there's one name. And then right now, the third team would be Sakai Asawafoa, and probably Lance Holtzclaw. Yeah. And that this is not a knock on Maurice Himes, who I know everybody is just really high on, a huge fan of, but I think they're still being a little cautious with the neck injury he had in the spring. Mm-hmm. And, you kind of watch him play, and there's a lot to like. There was a nice play the other day where the offense tried to run a reverse, and he sniffed it out perfectly, and he was just right there. But one guy who I wanted to talk about on the last segment, didn't really get a chance to, so this is my chance to do it now, is I wanted to talk about Sakai. Sakai has had a silently fantastic camp, and I think that's a little bit on us for not talking more about him, because he's done an awesome job setting the edge. He's been getting a decent amount of pressure on the quarterback, but he just really hasn't gotten his love. And I think that, last year he was kind of an unknown take, transferring from junior college. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. My apologies to Sky for that. But it was just kind of like, wait, why didn't, where did this come from? And now it's, okay, this is why they took him. He's a solid player.
Sakai reminds me, this is going to be a little bit of a stretch, and I know you're not going to like this as a Patriots fan, or at least not really recognize it, but Red Bryant. As a bigger guy on the edge, to where he's not Braylon Trice, he's not Lance Holtzclaw, but he's kind of got all the traits of all of them. And he's really, you mentioned it, he sets the edge super well. I think that is why we don't talk about him, because the other people get the results of him setting the edge. Not that he can't, but I think he kind of takes away a third of the line, to where now everybody else is able to go free. And Voy, another example, and even, some of the linebackers that can come in and blitz up the middle. I think that's what he does so well. I think it's kind of he does all the things nobody wants to talk about.
Yes.
But what you need to do to get on the field and have success.
So I think this is the best way to put it, and it's going to sound like an insult, and I promise you it's not. He's a jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah.
He is just solid at everything he's been asked to do this fall. And he's not going to be an elite, like, I'm going to burst off the edge and get 22 and a half sacks like Haoli Kikaha. And it's not going to be, oh, yeah, no, we can't ever run that guy's direction, because everybody loses reps.
Right.
But he's just, everything he's been asked to do has been, yes, this is solid. I love what I'm seeing from this guy. And I think that this is just a great player to have on the roster and just contribute where needed, because Maurice is still going to factor in. And obviously we hope that this all fares well for Zach, because it's just kind of a ridiculous situation that the NCAA has put him in and put the whole roster in because of this.
And I think, as you say that, I think it's actually like a blessing in disguise that they have Sakai, because of the uncertainty with Durfee. Because if you don't have Sakai, that, as much as we love the other guys that are coming up, that looks a lot more dicey than what you have otherwise. And I think it's, I think one thing I'm really curious to see is what part of his game does he improve on and maybe take that next step and get over that hump to where he is talked about. Because I think he can turn a notch just a little bit more, and I'll be curious to see if he can do that.
Just as we wrap up here, I'll bet it's setting the edge.
Yep.
And now I want to just, take a second to say thank you to everybody for listening today. Be sure to like, rate, subscribe wherever you get your podcast. And be sure to, if you're watching or if you're not, just to go subscribe on YouTube. We really appreciate that as well. And be sure to read both our work at si.com/college/Washington with Inside the Huskies. And all you everydayers out there, make sure you tune in tomorrow when we're going to start with the quarterback position, because especially with this team, well, so you're going to start. See you tomorrow.